When I coach people on building a practice, we're usually interested in bulk practice. That's when you carve out a substantial amount of time, say half an hour every morning, an hour every weekday. And for big work, say things related to your livelihood, or if you're trying to make your most important passion a real consistent part of your life, then that's a good approach. But I think we also underestimate incremental practice. That's when you do tiny amounts on a more frequent basis. And you can make a surprising amount of progress that way. Entire novels have been written in bursts of a few minutes at a time. So what's the case for incremental practice? For one thing, it's a whole lot easier to find time to do it. With bulk practice, there's always going to be a trade-off. If you spend an hour every morning practicing, that's an hour that you can't spend sleeping, or relaxing, or doing something else that's important to you. But carving out 3 minutes here and there, that's pretty easy. Another reason is that incremental practice can be done in your dead time. That's the time that you ordinarily would waste. Time waiting on hold, waiting to pick up your kids, sitting at red lights, waiting for your coffee to brew. You don't lose anything by taking advantage of those moments. Plus, incremental practice is a lot easier to start. If I asked you to get up right now and practice for an hour, you probably wouldn't do it. But if I asked you to try 3 minutes, I'll bet you could. So how do you start with incremental practice? Well, the first thing to do is to take stock of the opportunities to carve out tiny amounts of time. That could be dead time, or it could just be places where you can carve out 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and then pick whichever one seems the easiest to you. Brainstorm a list of things that you could usefully do in that time slot, and think small. Practicing one move, marking out a combination, running through a choreography, tapping out a Zill pattern. And then make sure that the things on that list fit that setting. If you're taking advantage of dead time on the bus, tapping out a Zill pattern on your thigh might work, but running through your choreography probably won't. Then identify what you need to do that and make sure that you have it on hand. For example, you might want to make sure that the song that you're working with is queued up on your playlist. Then just give it a shot. So let me give you an example of carving out time. One of my students practices for a few minutes every hour. She has her own office, so she sets a timer, and when that timer goes off, she closes the door and she practices for one song. If you don't have a private space at work, that might not work for you, but you could certainly do it anytime you're at home. And for dead time, one thing you could do is, if you often wait to pick up your kids, you could visualize your way through a choreography while you sit in the car. But there are a few things you need to keep in mind. One is that you need to be prepared for your routine to change. I used to text my mom on the bus to keep in touch, but then when I started working from home, I took fewer bus rides, and so that didn't really work. You also need to be prepared for your priorities to change. Before I got my new job, I started studying Turkish, and then that bus dead time was a time when I was awfully tempted to practice my flashcards instead of texting. But the good news is that these tiny little habits, these are very easy to replace. So if one falls by the wayside, you can always just create another. It's also important to note that this is not for every type of practice. If you're doing practice that requires a lot of preparation, special clothes, a really extensive warm-up, or lots of equipment setup, then you're probably better off with bulk practice. But be sure that you're questioning your assumptions. Do you really have to change into dance clothes to mark out that combination? What could you practice in your regular clothes? Do you really need to warm up fully, or would a 2-minute quickie warm-up do what you need? So whether you already have a substantial practice or not, consider adding incremental practice to your routine. It's easy to fit into your day, and you can make a substantial amount of progress. So look for opportunities to carve out a couple of minutes, and remember that dead time can be a goldmine. Then figure out what you can usefully do in that setting and what you need to have on hand so you can take advantage of it.